The Boys Season 4 was definitely a season of television. Season 4 is definitely the weakest of The Boys in terms of the writing, the pacing, and the usage of characters. I'm not saying it's an awful season outright, but when you compare it to Season 3, which was such a high point for the show, you'll sit back and ask yourself, was this written by the same people? For a quick recap, Season 4 takes place exactly 6 months after Season 3. Victoria Newman's on her way to the Oval Office while Homelander is coming to terms with his new responsibilities as the head of VOD and all the challenges that follow. Meanwhile, the boys are trying to do whatever's in their power to stop the Supes from going into the government by assassinating Victoria Newman. And of course, things don't exactly go to plan. Speaking of not going to plan, our boy Butcher is still suffering from the effects of temporary V that he took last season. Episode by episode, his health is slowly declining, and he's basically on borrowed time. We also have some brand new characters this season. We have Sister Sage, played by Susan Hayward, Firecracker, played by Valerie Curry, and Joe Kessler, who is played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who is essentially just doing his Negan thing, like he mostly does now. That is my general Cliff Note version of what the season's about. And on paper, all this stuff sounds really good for a 4th season, which is the penultimate season since Season 5 is where all this is coming to an end. But upon execution is where all this really falls through. I'm not a fan of how some of the characters were used this season, particularly Huey and Frenchie. Huey has this plotline with his father early on in the season that is, at the same time, really horrifying but very heartwarming too. So, spoilers if you guys haven't realized that already, but Huey's dad ends up having a stroke, so Huey spends some time with him in the hospital. Huey's mother, who abandoned him and his father years ago, comes back as well, and there's a lot of interpersonal drama that ensues. In order to try and save the father, the mother injects him with Compound V, which gives him powers that make him very delirious, and he ends up killing a lot of the people in the hospital. So Huey and the mother have to end up putting him down because he is a danger to not only himself, but everyone else too. And just the acting from Jack Quaid, especially in this scene, is really good. And he's very underrated in general, I feel like, as an actor. Not only in every season of this show, but every project that I've seen him in so far, he's done some grade A work. Now, with that said, after the stuff in this episode, Huey's role in the season goes down by a lot because he's not given much to really do, except for when he gets assaulted twice. Yeah, so we have 2 scenes in this show where he gets violated. One by Tech Knight, which is like the guy from Gen V. I didn't watch Gen V because my parents love me. No, but he's a carryover from Gen V because they're in this shared universe or whatever. I don't know. I didn't watch the show. I don't really plan to. So there's this party scene with Tech Knight, and Huey is going undercover as this soup named Webweaver, who is, yes, a Spider-Man parody, but instead of shooting webs out of his wrists as Spider-Man would, or web shooters rather, Webweaver instead shoots it from a hole that's around his butt that the showrunners wanted to show you in great detail because there's some freaky ass niggas. The other time Huey gets violated is by this shapeshifter soup who takes the form of Annie after she kidnaps her and ends up having sex with Huey like 20 times. And it's just... why did this need to happen? I'm not laughing because this is funny, I'm laughing because this is just very uncomfortable, even for this show. There's a common problem that a lot of long-running shows start to have after a while, and that is the issue of escalation. So when you're constantly having a show that is attempting to try and top itself with every new season, you're going to get to a point where you're just doing stuff for shock value and to get the audience to have a certain reaction. And in doing so, I feel like you run the risk of sacrificing the integrity of whatever character you're trying to prove that point with. So something like Herogasm from last season worked because you're taking such an absurd and bizarre concept like a bunch of soups having an orgy and showing all these weird and zany uses of their powers in like a sexual way. That's why you had that like Ant-Man stand-in guy basically pop out of that guy's urethra, which... Can I even say that on fucking YouTube? But yeah, when you get to a point where you're constantly trying to one-up yourself, when it comes to violence or gore or just shock value, then you're going to run the risk of just doing shit to do shit and not really having much of a purpose behind it. I feel like having all that stuff happen to Huey was very unnecessary and doesn't push his character further at all, really. Then let's talk about Frenchie's storyline with Colin. Colin is a character that doesn't really matter because he's not mentioned after like episode 6 or something. He's a dude that Frenchie takes a romantic interest in, but the whole twist is that Frenchie killed this guy's family. So he's trying to juggle the guilt of that while also trying to be with this dude and be happy. But once again, this plotline amounts to absolutely nothing. We've seen Frenchie have remorse from his past actions in the other seasons. The whole purpose behind this was to further push Frenchie and Kimiko pairing up, which, I mean, no shit, like, we knew that was gonna happen anyways. Why take such a roundabout way to get to the same outcome? It's all just a waste. Then Kimiko's whole storyline was with this trafficking group that took her as a kid, and to be honest, I don't remember what happened and I just saw these episodes, so that goes to show the impact that left on me. The only characters that get a strong focus this season are Homelander, A-Train, Victoria, and Butcher. A-Train is the MVP. He has gone through a really nice character arc, and I'm really happy where he ended off now. He's decided to help out the boys to finally feel like he's doing something good for a change, and I love that for him. Butcher is physically and mentally fighting with his demons. Everywhere he goes, he's seeing Becca, and also this new character played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Joe Kessler, who we thought was a guy that was one of his old friends or whatever, but it turns out this guy is a complete figment of Butcher's imagination. He's the person that's pushing Butcher towards these more violent tendencies versus Becca, who is acting as the angel on his shoulder, who is trying to get him to not only redeem himself by helping Ryan, but also making amends with the team. I really like this angle for Butcher, and it leads to some pretty cool moments this season. Victoria is another really flawed but interesting character that is trying to step out of her father's shadow, and in doing so, she's having to do shit that is very dubious. And of course, Homelander is trying to take advantage of her and everyone else. Not really sure if I like the way she died this season. I knew it had to be coming eventually, but I feel like she could have made it to at least season 5. But who knows what they have planned, like maybe this will all pan out for me after watching the next season, who knows. Next, I want to talk about Homelander. We learn so much more about Homelander's fucked up past and what made him the way he is. Anthony Starr's acting is so top-notch that I could say with confidence that he's currently one of the best actors in television. Hell, even his non-verbal facial reactions by themselves are so good to the point where every time there's a new episode, there's a new Homelander meme of him just looking at something crazy or just having a disgusting look on his face. As I said earlier in the recap, he is dealing with this new power he has at Vought where he's the head and in control of everything, meaning that he's in control of all the business decisions too, which is a part he's not too good at, despite him never wanting to admit that. So he ends up recruiting help from another character named Sage, who is the smartest person in the world, and she then becomes his new advisor on most of his important decisions, at least for a little while. I've also really enjoyed his scenes with Ryan. Like, you can tell a part of him genuinely wants to be a good father, but he's so fucked up in the head that he doesn't know how to. So you end up with this giant man-child who has tantrums every episode trying to raise a kid with superpowers who can probably be just as volatile if given the wrong influence. And I think their whole dynamic is really interesting. And Ryan, he's alright. They're kind of going back and forth with whether or not they want him to be exactly like his father, or if they want him to be, like that symbol of what a good hero should be and have him taking on his father in the future. They're really trying to play around with that whole duality, and I don't know, it's not really doing much for me personally. We're gonna have to see where all this ends up next season, and hopefully all this ties together in a fitting way at the end. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody. Oh yeah, Firecracker. Firecracker didn't really do much for me. I think the actress is good and she's doing a pretty decent job, but the character just doesn't grip me in any kind of way. So Firecracker is a parody of these extreme alt-right people who have these podcasts and these conferences where they're just spewing a bunch of bullshit. And it's yeah, I get it. She's making fun of that certain group of people, but there just isn't anything about her that I find interesting. She has beef with Annie because Annie was really mean to her as a pageant kid, and that's as far as that really goes. It just feels like she's another copy of Stormfront from season 2, but where Stormfront was intimidating and she had a lot of on-screen presence, Firecracker is just kind of there to please Homelander and be in his good graces. She ends up becoming his new milk donor, to say the least, and that is her whole thing. She's still alive, so I imagine she's going to be doing a lot more next season, but yeah, not really a fan of her. And that is my overall thoughts and opinions about season 4 of The Boys. Again, it's not a bad season, but in terms of the overall quality of The Boys, this is their worst season. It feels like a filler season before the final one, and it sucks because, again, like, there's a lot of good here, but there is just as much bad too. In the comment section, tell me what you guys thought of season 4 and whether you enjoyed it as much as the other ones or thought it was kind of mediocre. Anyways, with that stuff being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.